Hello and welcome to the BookTube channel, Jack and the Book Stack, where I talk about a wide variety of book genres and the bookish lifestyle. In 2023, I said it was going to be my year of fantasy reading, and wow, was it. I read a lot of great fantasy books. And in 2024, I'm still reading fantasy. However, my focus I think is shifting a little bit because I find myself really gravitating towards general fiction books. Now, I know this is a very broad category. In my mind, there's fiction and nonfiction. So much falls into that fiction category. So I typically refer to it as literary fiction. Although, trust me, I know there's experimental fiction, contemporary fiction, historical fiction. There's a lot of subgenres and categories within this term, so I know that I'm not using it correctly, and I probably will continue to misrepresent books in titling their genres, but I'm just going to refer to most things as literary fiction. I have been finding that there is so much variety in literary fiction when it comes to the character development, the plot, the tone, how I feel reading the books. It varies so greatly. And so finding great recommendations is really, really difficult in this category. I'm watching a lot of fabulous booktubers give me some recs, but I also wanted to check out some literary awards. I am so interested to hear from you in the comments down below. Do you care about the various literary awards that are out there? Do you get recommendations from any of them? Do they carry any weight with what you put on your TBR, what you enjoy? Really want to know because I'm also curious if there are other awards that I should be checking out. I wanted to see if my taste aligned with any one reward in particular, if it's something where a long list was announced, if I could pull some great recommendations for it. So I decided to do a little bit of a taste test. For this video, I am going to be reading books from the Women's Prize for Fiction. I decided to start with the Women's Prize for Fiction because looking at previous year's winners, I've already read a handful of them. I have read the 2012 winner, The Song of Achilles, 2017's winner, The Power, the 2019 winner, An American Marriage, and 2021's winner, Piranesi. If you're familiar with any of these titles, then you know that there's a lot of variety, even in this handful of prior winners that I have read. There's some fantasy in there, so I'm not even deviating that far from what I was reading in 2023. I wanted to do a little bit of research on the criteria for this award and see really what kind of books that it targets. So I found that the criteria is any woman writing in English, whatever her nationality, country of residence, age, or subject matter is eligible. Novels must be published in the United Kingdom between April 1st in the year the prize calls for entries and the 31st of March the following year when the prize is announced. The winner receives a check for £30,000 and a limited edition bronze statue known as the Bessie. The prize accepts novels entered by UK publishers, and authors must be alive at the opening date of the submissions. This award does exclude books of short stories or novellas, and they define that as 12,000 to 30,000 words. It excludes self-published books, and the judges are made up of a panel of 5 women, and they're given some criteria for picking the winner. It looks like they are looking for accessibility, originality, and excellence in writing by women. They're asked to forget about reviews, publicity, an author's previous reputation, the sense of who deserves it, and choose simply on the basis of the novels that inspire them, move them, make them think, that they admire, and that they enjoy. So very, very broad categories here. So these judges select a long list of 16 titles, and then they narrow it down to a short list of 6 and then 1 winner. And then I do have the key dates for 2024. This is the 28th year that this prize has been in circulation. And it looks like the date of the long list announcement is coming up, which is pretty exciting because I'm like, ooh, if I read these books and love it, maybe I could get on board with the hype, read the long list, and try to estimate who I think the winner could be. So I don't know, this whole project sounds really, really exciting. before I get carried away with the 2024 Women's Prize for Fiction Awards, let me look at some prior winners to see if this award aligns with my personal taste and what I'm looking for in literary fiction. The first one to check out is The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki.
1 year after the death of his beloved musician father, 13-year-old Benny O begins to hear voices. The voices belong to the things in his house: a sneaker, a broken Christmas ornament, a piece of wilted lettuce. Although Benny doesn't understand what these things are saying, he can sense their emotional tone. Some are pleasant, a gentle hum or coo, but others are snide, angry, and full of pain. When his mother, Annabelle, develops a hoarding problem, the voices grow more clamorous. At first, Benny tries to ignore them, but soon the voices follow him outside the house, onto the street, and at school, driving him at last to seek refuge in the silence of a large public library where objects are well behaved and know to speak in whispers. There, Benny discovers a strange new world. He falls in love with a mesmerizing street artist with a smug pet ferret who uses the library as her performance space. He meets a homeless philosopher poet who encourages him to ask important questions and find his own voice amongst the many. And he meets his very own book, a talking thing who narrates Benny's life and teaches him to listen to the things that truly matter. With its blend of sympathetic characters, riveting plot, and vibrant engagement with everything from jazz to climate change to our attachment to material possessions, The Book of Form and Emptiness is classic Ruth Ozeki, bold, wise, poignant, playful, humane, and heartbreaking.
The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki was the 2022 award winner for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I wanted to talk about this one first because I loved it. I rate this 5 stars, and it really surprised me because it didn't read as a solid 5-star throughout, but that's simply because this story really focuses on Benny and the relationship with his mother, who's a single mother, and he is like a teenager, and who really wants to read about a teenager? Like, parents of teenagers don't even want to read about raising a teenager. It is just a headache, and these two really struggle to understand each other sometimes, which I think is important because they both love each other, but they are just coming at things from the wrong perspective, even though they really, really try. So sometimes it didn't necessarily hit what I'm interested in reading about. However, this had the most unique writing style I have ever encountered, and such a unique theme. The theme of our relationship with things, I've never ever read that before. I mean, I've read things that kind of touch on consumerism or capitalism, which this definitely does, but just the way it was done was really, really fascinating. Mental health is also a huge theme of this book, and the treatment of people with mental health struggles. I mentioned that Benny hears voices, and so that's not received very well by society. So he's bullied by most, and that's really hard to read about. Poor Benny, because he is so kind-hearted. And even his mother is trying to understand him and provide help and support for him, but she really struggles with that. And that's what I mean, like they have a really tough time understanding each other. A couple of examples how Benny hears voices of things. So he's in class one day and he hears a bird hit the window of the classroom, and the window starts crying and screaming, and only he can hear it. But the window is so distraught because it's not using words, but it's kind of giving the tone to Benny, like, I didn't mean to hurt the bird, I didn't mean to do this, is the bird dead, is the bird okay? And the window is wailing. And so Benny rushes over and he's like pounding on the window or trying to comfort it or make it be quiet, I don't quite remember, but of course that causes a scene in the classroom. So they think he has all these issues, which I mean, he kind of does, that's kind of a unique thing. There's another situation in the classroom where he has a pair of scissors, and the scissors are yelling at him aggressively in a like Chinese language or tone. Again, these things don't always use words, but you know, he says, well, if you look at the scissors, they say made in China. So that's why it sounded Chinese to him, the noises that I was making. And these scissors were telling him to stab the teacher. And Benny just wanted it to stop talking. He wanted to shut up, so he stabbed himself in the leg with the scissors. So again, that kind of self-destructive tendencies really triggered a lot of concerns for his mental health. One of the absolute best aspects of this book and the writing style is that it is partially narrated by the book itself. Like, the book is narrating Benny's life. Sometimes it slips into second person because it's speaking to Benny, and then sometimes Benny speaks up and he's talking to the book. Like, there's one part where he's like, ew, don't talk about the sex life between my parents. Nobody wants to know that. So he'll talk to the book. Really, really fascinating. It's not consistent throughout. The whole thing is not narrated that way. We do get Benny's perspective, we get his mother's perspective, but it was really cool. Every time we hit one of those chapters where it was the book, I was so excited. And if you're wondering what a book has to say, on page 94, it is one of those chapters where the book is narrating, and it says, "Is it odd to see a book within a book? It shouldn't be. Books like each other. We understand each other. You could even say that we are all related, enjoying a kinship that stretches like a rhythmic network beneath the human consciousness and knits the world of thought together. Because we're all connected, we communicate all the time, agreeing, disagreeing, gossiping about other books, name-dropping, and quoting each other. And we often have our preferences and prejudices too. Of course we do. Biases abound on library shelves. These scholarly tomes disparage the more commercial books. Literary novels look down on romance and pulp fiction, and there's almost universal disregard for certain genres, like self-help. So it's so quirky and fun at times to get that perspective. I also underlined this one section on page 499. Picture for a moment your own bedside table. Imagine what it feels like to be the top book on your stack, occupying pride of place and enjoying your nightly attention. Sure, the days are long, but we look forward to the moment when you slip beneath the sheets, prop yourself up on the pillows, and turn on your reading lamp. That small, soughing sound you hear as you open the covers and turn the page is a sigh of relief. Then imagine our dismay when another volume comes along and tops us, often before you've even read our last page. Imagine the humiliation we feel as, book by book, we slip down to the bottom of your pile, knowing what we have failed to hold your attention and have been replaced, often by lighter, more relatable reads. Is it any wonder that some of us who have suffered this fate can get a bit snippy? Sadly, genreism is a form of bigotry, and one that is endemic in libraries and bookstores, any place where books gather. So awesome. And I feel horrible. I feel horrible for my little TBR shelf. I need to give it some love. So the plot was a little up and down for me. I didn't always enjoy the journey of a single mother raising her teenage son, but I did enjoy how they commonly tried to understand each other. I enjoyed Benny's struggle with his mental health as he's trying to understand this ability that he has, and how he really hones in on it to listen to what's important. And gosh, these struggles he goes through, it really does break your heart. So I felt really connected to the characters. And it was funny because I could sympathize with each of them so much when they were struggling with each other. Like with Annabelle, the mom, when she was struggling with him, like sneaking out, staying out late, and she's worried about him, calling the police to find her missing son. I understood her. But then when we're in Benny's point of view, I understand how he felt so confined and trapped at home that he needed to just get out, and how much comfort he found in going to the library and this found family that he built around himself. And also I mentioned his mom was a hoarder. I really enjoyed that journey. I actually love watching the show Hoarders because I'm so fascinated by the addiction aspect, and I love seeing people overcome their challenges. And something that is so unique, like I don't share that struggle with hoarding, so I just learned so much. So I like the show Hoarders, so reading about a hoarder and how she was holding on to her stuff was very fascinating. But then how overwhelming that was to Benny when all these things are talking to him. Such a unique book. And this is the exact reason why I wanted to try to read more literary fiction. Let's move on to the 2023 award winner for Women's Prize for Fiction, which is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver.
Demon Copperhead is the story of a boy born to a teenage single mother in a single-wide trailer with no assets beyond his dead father's good looks and copper-colored hair, a caustic wit, and a fierce talent for survival. In a plot that never pauses for breath, relayed in his own unsparing voice, Demon braves the modern perils of foster care, child labor, derelict schools, athletic success, addiction, disastrous loves, and crushing losses. Through it all, he reckons with his own invisibility in a popular culture where even the superheroes have abandoned rural people in favor of cities. Many generations ago, Charles Dickens wrote David Copperfield from his experience as a survivor of institutional poverty and its damages to children in his society. Those problems have yet to be solved in ours. Dickens is not a prerequisite for readers of this novel, but he provided its inspiration. In transposing his epic novel to her own place and time, Kingsolver has enlisted his anger and compassion, and, above all, his faith in the transformative powers of a good story. Demon Copperhead speaks for a new generation of lost boys, and all those born into beautiful, cursed places they can't imagine leaving behind.
A little change of pace. I have a beagle on my lap. He wanted to be part of the fun, so you may see his little head poke up here on camera. But I want to talk about the 2023 winner, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This is the one that I was probably the most excited to read for this video because I've heard so much about it. 2023 was pretty recent, duh. So I've seen this around, and it's also the Oprah's Book Club from 2022 and the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So there's a lot of hype around this book. I've heard it's incredible. And to give myself the greatest chance of success enjoying this, I did want to check out David Copperfield. Even though I said Dickens was not a prerequisite, I thought it would add a lot more depth and context to this read, so I did try to read this. Unfortunately, even though I started out really enjoying it, I got so bored. So about a third of the way through, I decided to put it down. I was trying to read this first, and I kind of figured, okay, I'm not enjoying this, so I'm going to put it down, and after I read Demon, maybe I'll come back to it. So I put it down, and I picked up Demon Copperhead. Now, this one, it does follow at least the beginning portion of David Copperfield so closely, and I love that because it pretty much takes that story and puts it in more modern times. More modern because I still think this is like the 80s, maybe. Like there's not like cell phones or like camera phones, right? So it's a little bit more modern day though, but the issues are so relative. So we really touch on the foster system and also the opioid crisis. So those are two things that make it a lot more modern. But again, just like as in Dickens, this focuses on institutional poverty, kind of like the poverty cycle and how hard it is to break out of it. So that is very interesting how the things that Dickens wrote about are still an issue today. Kind of terrifying when you put it in those terms, and really seeing how it is, right? So very curious. There was some interesting things in this book, but I do feel it was kind of light on the plot. This is mostly about Demon growing up. I think it's, I want to say he's like 5 or 6 in the beginning, and then he's about like 18 towards the end. So it's like his childhood and how poverty impacts children. And I think for me, I needed themes to be a little bit more tell, not show, if that makes sense. Because I think that there's still a lot of critiques that could be made on this book. Like, how do I explain this? Like unfounded, like people that don't understand the poverty cycle. And I myself want to learn more. So there's a part where, Demon becomes an orphan and he's going through the foster care system. And that's very interesting and hard in a lot of different ways. But then he finds himself in a really good situation where he's pretty well off. And he self-sabotages it. And I feel like critics could really read this and be like, well, look, it's his own fault. Like, he didn't take advantage of the help that was provided to him and the opportunity that was there. So this was a situation of his own making. And I think there's so much more that could have been explored there of why he self-sabotaged. It was touched on. There's like a sentence where he's like, if I'm not providing value in this way, this family isn't going to want me anymore. I might as well just leave. And then like the company that he chooses to keep, like, he just makes bad decisions. And there's one character who is kind of parallel to his situation in a lot of ways, but then he finds like a lot of success in his life. So I feel like people that don't really understand institutional poverty could be like, look, it's his own fault. And that's not the point of the book. I wish that was explored more. As far as the opioid crisis, so Damon gets addicted to painkillers. It makes me really excited to read this nonfiction, Empire of Pain, because this is also about Oxy, which was the catalyst for the opioid crisis. So it makes me super hyped to read this, to learn more about it. But I also wish, like, there was a small section that called that out. One of the medical professionals that worked at the clinics there was telling Damon how their neighborhood, their area was targeted because it's poorer. And I just wish that was like extrapolated a little bit more, because I think that's very interesting and that explains a lot, and that is so relevant. My overall opinion of the book, I liked it. I was kind of bored because, again, this is just about the people that come in and out of Demon's life and how he makes bad decisions that keeps him in this kind of like cycle of poverty and addiction. And I was kind of a little bit bored. So that middle of the road, it's one of those that it was good, but for me, it didn't have like an emotional impact on me. And it also made me decide, like, I don't want to pick this back up, because I think what did capture my attention a little bit, it was like that it was a modern times, like the opiate crisis, for example, right? Like, I was kind of interested in that. I don't know how that would be represented in the source material, but I'm not interested in picking that one up based on how this one went. Moving on to the 2020 award winner for Women's Prize in Fiction, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell.
England, 1580. The Black Death creeps across the land, an ever-present threat, infecting the healthy, the sick, the old, and the young alike. The end of days is near, but life always goes on. A young Latin tutor, penniless and bullied by a violent father, falls in love with an extraordinary, eccentric young woman. Agnes is a wild creature who walks her family's land with a falcon on her glove and is known throughout the countryside for her unusual gifts as a healer, understanding plants and potions better than she does people. Once she settles with her husband on Henley Street in Stratford-upon-Avon, she becomes a fiercely protective mother and a steadfast force in the life of her young husband, whose career on the London stage is just taking off when his beloved young son succumbs to sudden fever. A luminous portrait of a marriage, a shattering evocation of a family ravaged by grief and loss, and a tender and unforgettable reimagining of a boy whose life has been all but forgotten and whose name was given to one of the most celebrated plays of all time. Hamnet is a mesmerizing, seductive, impossible to put down, a magnificent leap forward from one of our most gifted novelists.
Okay, what to say about Hamnet? I already told you a little bit about the plot. I didn't like it. I really didn't like this book. I actually technically DNF'd it. But since I read past the 50% mark, like, I count it as read because I have enough understanding of the writing style, the characters, the plot, that like I count it as read if I cross 50%. I was so bored. I did not care. I did not care about Hamnet. I did not care about his sick sister. I didn't care about how his parents met. and how quirky his mom was with her falcon, and how she decided to purposely get pregnant because, you know, her parents forbid them getting married, so she decided to like trap him. Like, I didn't like her. I didn't like anybody. I was kind of, okay, I wasn't rooting for the kids' failure, like Hamnet, but the parents, like when we go to their point of view and how they met and everything, I was kind of wishing they would fail. They just seemed like young kids who felt like they knew it all. Like, I didn't buy into their love story. I wasn't invested in the characters, the plot, nothing. So yeah, I don't really have much more to say about this book. I don't recommend it. I didn't finish it. I didn't enjoy it. Not my thing. In conclusion, we have a wide variety of reactions here. I loved a book, I liked a book, and I disliked a book. So, is the Women's Prize for Fiction a good source for me to find recommendations? Heck if I know. I'm still gonna say yes, which is really interesting because I'm saying yes, understanding that I've already read some of the other ones. I enjoyed Piranesi, I enjoyed An American Marriage, I enjoyed The Song of Achilles. The Power, I think, was super, super unique, so I respect that book for what it did. If I had only read these three without those ones, I would not like the Women's Prize for Fiction. And here's why. Each of these three books I feel like was a little bit too stereotypical of what women would typically write about and what women would like to read. And that's because each one has to do with children. And it kind of hits on that motherhood theme. Like, the only thing women care about is motherhood and children. And I just found it so stereotypical and like put women's interest in like a box. Even though they had other themes with them, like this one, institutional poverty and the opioid crisis, and this one had to do with mental health, a relationship with things. Even though there were other themes and the plots were so different, the characters were so different, each one focused around children, had like a child's point of view, focused on motherhood and, you know, mother-son relationships. Very heavy mother-son relationships in these. That bugs me a lot. A lot. And I know those other books I mentioned that I've read previously, there's such a wide variety that they don't follow this theme. So I know the entire award doesn't like focus in on just motherhood themes. But if I had only read these three, I would say that it's a stereotypical poor representation of women's interests. That sounds like a really harsh critique, but again, I do like the Women's Prize for Fiction. I will look at their long list when it's announced. It's just an interesting observation I had about these three. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this video. Happy reading. I'll see you next time.